As the course enters its 7th week, I wanted to spend just a couple of minutes sort of clarifying a few things that are right on the horizon, 2 important things that you're going to be experiencing and that are due just soon after spring break is over, and that's coming up. So first of all, in week 7, you should be reading the last of the reading assignments for part 2 of this book and for project number 2. And it's the chapter on memory. So hopefully you've read the chapter on perception, and then the next chapter after that on attention, and now you're on memory. And to me, memory is one of the most fascinating sort of elements to learning, and to what learning is, and to how people learn, and what you can do to help people learn. And is all learning tied to memory of some kind, or tied to a lot of memories. I find it fascinating, and hopefully you'll find the seminal studies that are addressed in the memory chapter very fascinating as well. So that's the last chapter from here that you're going to be reading that applies to this part of the course, and it applies to project number 2. So I just wanted to say a little bit about project number 2, and then I'll make an announcement about exam number 2. So an important announcement there. First of all, project number 2 is due on the 22nd of this month. And project number 2, first of all, there is an outline that you can download, and that I want you to download and use this to record the information that you're going to be reflecting on. There's places in here in this document where you can record, what your responses are to some of the things that are asked of you. And the first thing you have to do for the project is I list the principles that are presented in the book related to perception, attention, and memory, and I put them in kind of a grid, and I'm asking you to provide a personal example of how that principle applies to you and your own mental processes. And then I'm asking you to reflect on how that principle might be applied in teaching, either in your own teaching or teaching in general. And again, there's no right or wrong answer to any of those things, but it's definitely it's completely grounded in your own life, in how your brain works and how you interpret that, and how some of the basic ideas presented in those chapters might be applicable in a typical teaching situation. Part 2 of the project asks you to analyze a research study that has been published, and I found 3 studies that align with either perception or attention or memory, and I could have picked from a lot more, but these are just representative of concepts or variables that relate to one of those 3 areas of the mind. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to read the article and then to analyze it based on the characteristics of a positivist research model or a research design. So these are all positivist. They might be mixed method or have a little bit of interpretivist or qualitative components, but they all of the samples that I provide have clear positivist, experimental-like models or methods that are being used. So you're going to analyze it, and you're going to identify from the article the research problem, what the article says about the hypothesis, what the design type is for the article, what the variables are, and that kind of thing, just to sort of give you an opportunity to apply some of those concepts of different types of research designs in the positivist vein to an actual published article. And then for part 3 of the project, I'm going to have you locate an article that really relates directly to a variable of interest for you, an educational variable of interest that you find important in your own life or in your own practice if you're teaching. And so you'll go out and do a search for an article, and I want you to find an article that is either completely positivist methodology, a quantitative methodology, or is a mixed method where it has elements of a quantitative study as well as qualitative. That would be a mixed method. And I want you to analyze it the same way you analyzed the article that I assigned for you that you get to pick from, one of those 3. But I'm actually going to have you load that article into an AI tool and ask AI to analyze it and identify those different aspects of the research design. The same elements that you were asked to do for part 2 of the project. And then I'm going to have you just look at what AI said and what you already identified in your own mind and reflect on whether or not AI did a good job of analyzing it or whether it got some things wrong. Because as I progress in my practice, I'm using AI to help support me in more and more ways. And I'm also finding that I have to review everything so carefully because so much of what it returns is problematic in many ways. But you don't know that unless you really get under the hood. Likely, in your case, it'll likely do a fairly good job of analyzing most of the things that you identified, but it may have. But it will likely have issues with something. So I want you so you're going to do that for the 3rd part of this project. You don't need to attach the article that you picked. You just need to tell me, what the article was in here, recorded in this document, and then also your analysis. Okay. So that is project number 2. Now let me just say one quick word about exam number 2. So for exam number 2, first of all, remember that I have a practice exam that asks the same kinds of items that are on exam number 2. I want you to make sure that you take that after you've studied, prepared yourself well for the exam. And if you have any questions or concerns, try to communicate that to me about any individual items at the beginning of exam week. So that'll be the first couple of days after spring break. And so that's something that you might want to do, early the week when you get back from spring break or even earlier. Another thing that's going to be a little bit different this time about the exam is due to some security issues that are sort of have become problematic across campus. You are going to be using a new piece of like a software add-on for D2L when you take the next assessment, exam number 2, and it's called Respondus Lockdown Browser. It's the lockdown browser, and it's a little tiny piece of software that focuses your computer or your machine just on the assessment items that are being presented, and it will release all aspects of your computer that you're working on once you submit the exam. So in order to make sure that you have that software properly installed before the exam, I put a little tiny practice quiz. It's just one question. It does require the lockdown browser in order to just answer it. It's not worth any points. It'll take you 10 seconds to answer. But once you submit it, I'll know that you have properly installed the software on your computer. So sometime this week, if you can, maybe before spring break, go to D2L, go up to the where it says quizzes, go to that tab, and then look for the lockdown browser quiz that I included there. And if you don't have the software installed, it'll have a link there for you just to click, and then it'll install the software on the device that you're using, and then you should be able to take the quiz. You only need to do that once for any of these quizzes. Once you have it, it'll be on your machine. But I'm telling you this now because you might be using a machine that isn't your own personal one. It might be a school one, or it might be something that at your work or somewhere. And so you need to have the ability to install software on the machine you're going to be using for the quiz. Otherwise, you'll have to get some administrator for that machine to install it for you. All the computers at Radford University and all the labs and everywhere, all of those machines have that software installed. So you don't have to worry about that. But please make sure that you get that taken care of. I'll email you to remind you about this if you haven't submitted your that little quiz, that little practice quiz question. It's just one question. I'll make sure I get on you, but you need to make sure that is ready to go before the exam opens up on the 13th of March. Okay, so anyway, that's it for the exam. As always, let me know if you have any questions, comments, or concerns about anything. And yeah, one more week before spring break. Yay.